Hello, and welcome to tonight's presentation entitled Meditation, A Way of Always Being Okay. And this is a follow-up of last week's presentation, which we talked about meditation practice. So tonight what I'll do is I'll just take a few minutes to review that material. There were a few points that I just thought were important to pick up. And then tonight's new material, I'm going to talk more about the three bodies. As I have mentioned before, I work with three different bodies or systems that we would call bodies. And finally, I want to dig a bit deeper into dissolving boundaries, um, which is part of the process of sitting quietly and meditating and opening. But before I do that, I just want to show you a picture of a trip that I took to China. This is in western China in Sichuan province near Tibet. And you can see the people there living a fairly basic lifestyle, but they were really happy. And I had the good fortune to have this young boy come and sit beside me. And he's a monk. And they were holding a festival in his honor. And you can tell by his robe and the particular on his arm, you can see this the special cloth that indicates his status. So at quite an early age, this young fellow had been meditating, and it was quite an experience just sitting beside him. Okay, I just wanted to share that with you. Now, when we looked at limits and expectations of meditation last week, I just wanted you to understand that there were a few variations. The easiest thing to do or to encounter or to take advantage of with meditation is the health and wellness benefit. The immediate effect of practicing a meditation for a few minutes daily or whenever you feel you need to recenter and, as I call, hit the reset button. Then you could have the healing and maintenance, which requires more attention, more dedication. I would say someone who's interested in ongoing maintenance of themselves and to maybe heal a particular issue, you would want to do a daily practice of at least around 15 minutes to 20 minutes, half an hour a day. And again, this is always with the guidance of your health professionals. The third area was awakening, and awakening happens as a part of awareness. As you become more aware, there's a process often referred to as awakening. And beyond that, with more practice and dedication, some practitioners have focused on developing special abilities, and they range quite a bit. But the most common one I see is people who practice hands-on healing and are able to focus their abilities on helping others. And finally, as I mentioned, there's the overall thing of the social debt of repaying back to society something, giving back. I introduced the idea of boundaries and limitations, and I called it mind control because that's really where this is centered. It's centered in the internal map, and there are three types of mind control things you will encounter. I think there's only three. There could be more, but they tend to fall in these three categories. One is messages or feelings of limitation. Something is limiting you, preventing you from going forward. It's a limiting behavior. The third one is a fear. You get a sense of avoidance, a sense of fear at the boundary point. And the third one is sometimes when people approach a boundary point, I know myself, I just distract myself. I think of something else, I go do something. So these three types of mind control happen when you approach a boundary. You'll be limited, you might experience fear, you might be distracted. Now, I just want to point out here is that we mind control ourselves. Some of these three approaches we've installed ourselves, some from parents, others from friends, and of course, society in general will try to control you as an individual. When you start to become more aware, there's something generally called conscious awareness, expansion. That you'll begin to expand your awareness of self as the partitions dissolve and your limitations, fears, and distractions begin to just fade away. You'll get closer to what is often called the source. I like to think of it as just who you really are without all of the layers that have been put on us over the years. There's an original you, the original source you. And when you approach that source, it will begin to grow and wake up. So let's go to the new material. Very often I talk to people about what they might call mind chatter. So people have a lot of stuff going on in their heads, some more than others. I personally feel it's important to listen to yourself. So if you're getting a message in the form of words, but the messages could be a visual impression, it could be a sound, it could even be a feeling, it could be olfactory, it could be taste or smell. You know the expression that doesn't smell good, that doesn't feel good, I don't like the sound of that, I can't see that happening. So we can express things in terms of our modes of perception, and which there are standard modes plus words. Now these are very important, and you might actually have a primary mode. Most people do. Quite often it's visual. I'm a mix of visual and kinesthetic, and I get my information that way. So your inner voice will be passing on to you a lot of information, some of which will be the mind control information. So you might get a limiting message from your inner voice. You might get a message of fear. You might get a message of distraction. When you listen to those, understand that you will go through one of four states. And the four states are pretty straightforward. You can have the initial state of just being okay. This other state you can have is you're not okay. So recognizing when you are okay about something, there's nothing to do, you're fine, you go on with your life. But when your inner voice is not okay, you need to recognize that. The other two states are transitional states. So you could be okay, but you're moving towards not feeling okay. And you might be not okay and moving towards feeling okay. So there's two transitional states and two key states, not being okay and being okay. And the point I'm trying to make here is that when you encounter a boundary, if there is something called resistance, if you are resisting that boundary, it's going to be for one of those three reasons. So you approach a boundary, you have that second state of not being okay about something. If you listen closely to your inner voice, it will tell you whether it's a limiting type of instruction, such as don't go there, don't do that, or fear-based instruction, danger, well, there's danger, or just a distraction. When you recognize that you are okay, well, there's nothing else to do. You're okay, so fine. You just go on with your life. If, on the other hand, there is something from your inner voice telling you that you're not okay, if you address it immediately, you can neutralize it, and I'll go into that later. So the three bodies, I think the one that everyone is familiar with is your physical body. It's solid. You can feel it, you can touch it. And I guess one of the main uses of a physical body is that we can reproduce. We can procreate other copies of ourselves. And some people feel that is the prime driver for existence. But whether or not you believe that, it is important. But here's some of the neat features. There are trillions of cells in our body, and each cell is an individual, has its own purpose, knows what it is, knows what it has to do, and is self-sufficient. We have over 200 bones with joints attached to each bone. And our 5 vital organs come together to form 11 fairly complicated systems. That's our physical body. And as I said, it's something you can touch and feel. But there's also an energy body. And I like to think of the energy body being more like a liquid, an electrical liquid. It flows. And they talk about the energy in your body flowing. They talk about the energy being blocked. Um, Under traditional Chinese medicine, the energy body is used to regulate. By manipulating the various channels, you can re-establish normal health. And the basic thing I like to point out here is that there was an experiment done some time ago, I believe in the 20s, called the double slit experiment, which they recognized. It caused a lot of confusion, but one of the things that came out of the double slit experiment, you can Google that and look at it if you want, is that particles are actually an instant of a wave. A particle, a solid, is just an instant or a snapshot of a wave. And we cannot process waves. We cannot see waves. We cannot process them, but we can process a particle. And the double slit experiment clearly illustrated that when you look at the interaction of waves, we will convert them into a particle. So the energy body can't be seen, but it can be measured. It can be seen. When you measure it, you end up with points. Again, we go at the acupuncture points because that's where we can measure it. But it is actually a wave. And the third body is the spirit body. And if you just think back over literature or movies you would see, the spirit is quite often compared to a gaseous light, like a cloud. And people refer to heaven as being surrounded in clouds or that white light. So the spirit body is often referred to as a light and associated with compassion and the infinite aspect of light and how it can travel. So these 3 bodies interact together. And I might mention at this point that there is a process called photoelectronics where they biophotonics where they can see the light being emitted from each cell in the body. And I believe the photon is being emitted from the DNA of a cell. Just thought I'd mention that. Those are the 3 bodies. And when you meditate, the 3 bodies will begin to communicate. Here's an example of a more Indian tradition where they look at the 3 bodies, the physical body, the subtle body or the energy body, and then the spirit body. So how do you remain okay all of the time? And as I mentioned earlier, there were 4 states, 2 of which are transitional, and 2 are your traditional okay and not okay. The first thing to do is actually recognize which state you are in. And I'm totally surprised how little I was aware of my own mental state or emotional state. So as I became more aware of how I felt, then I could deal with it. And I could observe those 4 states. And what's interesting is that these states affect all 3 bodies. And they will provide feedback. So it's a personal choice whether to resist or not resist. And resisting is associated with not being okay. So a very simple way to be okay is to stop resisting. And that's easy to say and harder to do. But it has to do with what direction you're going in. Do you want to move towards being okay if you're not okay. So even if you're not okay about something, you can change the transition and say, look, I'm not okay about this, but I want to be okay about it. I want to understand why I'm not okay and I want to repair it. Just by identifying that you're not okay and establishing your orientation, should you choose, to go that direction towards being okay, provides a level of healing. Now, it's perfectly okay to say, I am not okay about something, and you're just not okay. That's perfectly normal. But be okay about not being okay and accept that as your choice. So there's a way of resolving the tension associated with not being okay. The way to resolve it is to reduce the resistance and the boundary will begin to dissolve. So there's kind of a decision tree where you first recognize your state. And if you're okay, there's nothing else to do. But if you're not okay, or you're not sure what state you're in, then you're either in a transition state or you're actually not okay. Identifying whether that state that you're in is resourceful. And if it's resourceful, even if you're not okay, you can say, I can be okay about this because I don't like it, but it's good for me, it's resourceful. But if it's not resourceful, if it's preventing you from moving forward, then you need to step it up a bit. Because if you leave it alone, you get what I call a feedback recursive loop. Your subconscious will assume that your silence or your lack of dealing with the mental state means yes, or it means I need to process it more. So it will just come back to you later. And everybody probably knows about how things just keep coming back, these unresolved things. Well, the way to resolve these states is to come to a conclusion to reduce the resistance and either be okay about not being okay or actually be okay. And we'll talk more about that and how this relates to your meditation practice. So here's one way that you can incorporate what I've been talking about with your mental states and not being okay and resistance. Is it something called doing nothing? And when you're meditating, as I've instructed you to do, is to not move, not wiggle, stay focused, you will be distracted. When you feel yourself approaching an internal barrier or boundary, just looking at something, just focusing on it, will begin to dissolve it. You don't have to do anything, you just have to be calm and let whatever voice is coming to you come to you, listen to it, and allow your consciousness to resolve it. It's called doing nothing, not reacting to what you're seeing or hearing or feeling, just observing it. And the act of observing, the act of just looking, is one version of doing nothing. You're just going to look at it, you're not going to do anything. And what happens, and it feels almost magical, is that you will begin to heal it. So we're going to do a little meditation now, and we'll practice doing nothing in our meditation. And I'll take some questions at the end. But again, I'd like to thank the Center for the Study of Sport and Health here at St. Mary's for sponsoring these presentations. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me or contact me. Thank you very much.